Hi, I'm Larry Taylor. Welcome. One of the things that I realized recently that I've always kind of gotten mixed up, or maybe I've just never thought about it in these terms before, and that is the difference between confession and repentance. I think I kind of, in my mind, lump them together, like they were one and the same kind of thing. Um, you feel bad, you confess, and you're forgiven, and that is repentance, kind of thing. But what I'm realizing now is that, from a biblical point of view, repentance and um, confession are two different things. And there's a third aspect here that I've pretty much completely left out, and that is the whole idea of lamentation. And I think there's an order here that's important to keep in mind. And the order um, is an order that starts with confession and then moves to lamentation and then results in repentance. Confession is acknowledging that harm has been done. And another aspect of this that I think has slipped by me in the past is that I have thought of confession and repentance. I haven't thought much about lamentation, but in the past, when I did, I thought about these things in terms of individual sin, which is typical of my being an American. We are very, very individualistic, and we have a great deal of trouble thinking systemically. We have a great deal of trouble thinking in terms of how we, and in fact all of creation, is interconnected. Picture, if you will, three people, and wrapped around them is a giant rubber band. And they're required to keep the rubber band taut enough so that it doesn't fall down. Now, those three people, everything they do as individuals is going to affect the other two. So if two of them move closer together in order to keep that rubber band from dropping, the third one's going to have to move further away. Well, that's a very simplistic example of a triangle, involving three individuals. But we are not just three individuals. We're millions of individuals interconnected. And not only that, but we are millions of individuals living in the midst of an environment in which we are interconnected with all living things. One of the astounding conclusions of recent studies in physics is that two subatomic particles, when they are near one another, if you then separate them from each other, no matter how far you separate them, when one of them does something, the other one is affected. So you could have, two quarks, subatomic particles, too small to even see through any means. And they're next to each other, and they have influence on each other. And then you could move them far apart. You could take one and put it on a spaceship and send it to Mars. And the other one you could keep here in the laboratory, if we had a laboratory. And when you do something that causes this one to change, this one's going to be affected. It's an illustration of that same rubber band principle. We are connected to one another. We're connected to each other. So sin is never just an individual thing. Sin is always has ramifications that stretch out, that touch others, that change things. And sin can be built into the system itself so that becomes a systemic kind of problem. So back to confession. I need to acknowledge that harm has been done. That is confession. Our Catholic friends, our Orthodox friends, our Anglican Episcopalian friends have an advantage, I think, over some of the rest of us in that they are in a habit of, many of them are in a habit of confessing out loud sin to another person, in those cases, a priest, who then prays for them, advises them, and in some instances offers some words of absolution. I think that's a beautiful thing if that relationship is a strong godly relationship. And I think the rest of us can have that also if we will develop the kinds of friendships and connections where we can be openly honest with one another. As I look at my life, there are maybe two people in my life that I could openly, honestly confess anything to. And I know that they would point me towards God's forgiveness. I know that they would point me towards God's healing. I know that they would point me towards roads of repentance. So confession is acknowledging that harm has been done. On a societal level, harm has been done. Racism is a terrible sin, for example. It has harmed, and continues to harm so many people. Confession. Then I think we really need to enter into lamentation. That time of not only acknowledging that harm has been done, but as much as is possible, feeling the harm that was done. Lamentation allows us to empathize, to feel what the other person is feeling, to walk in the other person's shoes, to not only, for example, with racism, acknowledge that harm has been done, but also to feel what it must be like to be a, for example, young black man, assumed guilty, followed around in stores, pulled over by the police with guns drawn. What does it feel like? Now, I can't fully feel that because that's not my experience, but through prayer and seeking God and meditating, and perhaps most of all, through getting to know people who are different than I am, I can begin to move towards empathy, and I can enter into that lament. And then the third step is repentance. Repentance repairs the harm that was done. So confession acknowledges that harm has been done. Lamentation enters into the harm that has been done, feels the harm that has been caused, and then repentance, as much as is possible, corrects the harm that has been done. Now, obviously, I can't change society in general, and there are some things that you what can you do to correct it? But we can make steps in that direction. So, again, for example, with racism, I can't solve the problem of racism, but I can learn to be anti racist. I can speak up. Uh, I can use my white privilege to defend and to uh, point people away from racism and so forth. And I'm just using racism as one example. This I think applies to any kind of sin because sin causes harm. And confession acknowledges that harm. Lamentation enters into the harm, and repentance repairs the harm. God bless you.